Hello everybody and welcome back to Apple Gaming SE. This is news and opinions for March 17th through March 23rd, 2024. Subscriber update for this week. It looks like I have gained and lost subscribers. So I spent the most of this last week at 189 subscribers, down one from the week prior. However, somebody at the last minute here on Saturday has subscribed back to the channel, so I'm still at 190. So whoever you are, thank you. As usual, YouTube is not telling me who has subscribed. So regardless, as always, whether it's many or a few, I appreciate you all, and I hope we can continue to enjoy this journey together. So the biggest news this week is, I don't think we can avoid it, is that the Department of Justice is suing Apple. They have finally launched their lawsuit. So in case you had missed it, and there's multiple sources for this, I'll post the story links in the comments or in the description section of the video. If you had missed it, earlier this year, the Department of Justice said that they were on track to initiate the anti-competitive lawsuit against Apple they've been working on for years. It was speculated this would take place either in March or April, and sure enough, it looks like the Department of Justice is right on time. I read the opening statement of the Department of Justice complaint, and what strikes me as most interesting is that this doesn't appear to be an anti-competitive lawsuit in an effort to ensure that consumers aren't being abused in the market, as you might expect. It seems to be an effort to sue Apple over anti-competitive developer relationships, which strikes me as odd, and admittedly I'm no lawyer, since these are usually an effort to protect end users or consumers of a product or service. As it stands, I don't think anyone can say that Apple is locking in users to their platforms. You can read your Kindle books on iPhone or Android, Mac or PC. You can obviously get Gmail anywhere using the web browser or their many apps. Apple Music has apps on iPhone, Android, Mac, and PC, and Apple Podcasts has a website where you can use it for listening. Admittedly, it's not a very feature-rich website, but it is there. The point being is that your data is not really locked into Apple's ecosystem. You know, you can get your photos out of the Photos app. All you have to do is export them, and you can load them up to Google Photos or whatever other service you want. You know, I think that the end user and the consumers are allowed to pull their stuff out of Apple's ecosystem. They just have to do a little bit of legwork to do so. And so I'm looking at the Department of Justice's complaints, and it's essentially throwing everything it can into the anti-competitive claims. And this is a normal prosecutorial practice. I don't say that word very often. So while this is a normal prosecutorial practice or tactic, it forces the defendant to defend against every single claim brought against them. So part of Apple's defense is their ecosystem would end up being more like Android, and I would argue more Windows-like. And this would eliminate the consumer choice of keeping their products as the, quote, private and secure, end quote, choice. And I agree with this. It is what is the primary draw for me to Apple's ecosystem. In a world where Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon, along with thousands of other data brokers, are trying to harvest your behaviors and preferences to monetize you and your fellow citizens. When I buy an Apple product, I know I'm a customer and not a product myself. And so my position is a little bit of a distillation from 9to5's Mac's article, our fourth article in the link here. Apple's biggest defense against the Department of Justice antitrust lawsuit is its customers. And so the writer of this article, his name is Ben Lovejoy, comes up with a number of examples of why customers would be the best defense for Apple. And I mostly agree with it, but there's one point he doesn't capitalize on, which is the core of my position, and that's data collection by third parties. To be specific, the writer states that even if other payment processors can use the NFC chip in the iPhone, now he's referring to the EU, this is a practice that's allowed in the EU, not anywhere else in the world, that he, as the writer, he can still choose to use Apple's wallet, which will change nothing about his life. And this is true. But there's a bigger ethical argument that I would make, that if your card issuer or bank can use their own payment processor, they can collect the data on your purchases, then sell that aggregate data to their partners. This is, to me, the biggest ethical issue in the debate. This kind of data collection is unacceptable to me, and with Apple as the payment processor, they don't allow the individual banks and payment issuers to have that data on your specific purchases. And I think that's a moral good. I think all payment processors should operate this way. If I have a card issued by MasterCard, I accept that MasterCard will analyze my payments, frequency, location, price totals, etc. And that's to help them optimize their payment processing mechanisms. And that's okay. I've agreed to a one-to-one business relationship with MasterCard. But what I'm not trying to do is give that same information to fintech data broker ABC, who can plug that into their algorithm and then resell that data again to Meta or Google or whomever else, so that they can basically make a little more money off of selling my data to someone else. And so that's my biggest issue with it. And I think if there's going to be any harm done, it's the allowance of other parts of the market to analyze your data in a way that is not explicitly agreed to by the end user or the customer. Another big point that has come out during this already is that Apple tried to make the Apple Watch work with Android phones. And I'm linking GSM Arena's article, saying that they are, we'll say, a little more Android friendly than Apple friendly, but even their take on this wasn't so bad for Apple. And this is something else I've spoken on as well. And while I think the Apple Watch is the best wrist-based fitness tracker out there, I want all of that medical and health data syncing on my devices. I want it to stay on the device. I don't trust it to stay on my device if that is an Android device. Now, I've spoken on Samsung's utterly lackluster privacy policy, which is literally just one sentence, and just how non-secure Android's Firebase analytics can be. So all of that being said, Apple did explore this possibility and worked to see if it was viable for 3 years. 3 years. Apple really did want to try to make the watch a Halo device for Android users. But, and this is speculation on my part, if they felt they couldn't maintain the privacy of the device in the Android ecosystem, then I'm glad they didn't compromise on a key ethical stance that they hold. I'd rather the watch not be on platforms where that data is more easily compromised. And I don't mean hacked, I mean given away by Google or others. We talked about the reselling of your data to data brokers. Now, with all of the legal topics covered, let's get back to the tech. Security fixes this week, one of which is major and the other is of an unknown severity, yet could still be related. That's speculation. Let's talk about the major one first, the Apple Silicon security flaw. This first one is coming from Macworld. There's a vulnerability in Apple's Mac chips, and the fix might be as bad as the flaw. In the M-series chips, there's an opportunity to exploit and gather running cryptographic code. Done in the right way, this can cause the cryptographic keys to be partially captured, and eventually the entire key could be resolved. The issue is that disabling the feature, which mixes normal system memory with the secure data memory dependent prefetcher, we'll call it DMP memory, would also create a performance hit to the system by a, quote, non-trivial amount, end quote. This would be due to utilizing ciphertext blinding, which is added before and after it is stored into and loaded out of memory. Alternatively, GoFetch researchers, that's the company who did this primarily, they speculate that this could be resolved by moving all cryptographic algorithms to running on the efficiency cores, as this doesn't have the ability to mix DMP mechanisms with the main memory. There's still a concern that DMP could be enabled on the E-cores by unannounced changes. Ars Technica also notes that the M3 series chips have a switch that developers can invoke to disable the feature. So clearly Apple, when they were made aware of this in 2022 initially from a similar exploit, not the GoFetch exploit, but one called Augury, they took it seriously and added a mitigation feature to the M3 hardware. And lastly, this may not be so big of a concern because it requires physical access to the Mac to run the exploit. Without a remote execution mechanism, the opportunity for attackers is majorly reduced. For Intel Mac users like me, the research is ongoing, so here's hoping that the old T2 security chips in the Intel Macs aren't suffering the same flaw. On a related note, there's a reason that Apple is being vague with the iOS 17.4.1 update. This is also coming from 9to5Mac. I say it's related. It could be related. We're not sure yet. So not much is detailed from Apple regarding this, except that the updates for iOS, iPadOS, and visionOS all came out this week. A similar patch was not released for macOS or Apple Watch. So if indeed this is the same exploit as GoFetch, Apple has either found the way to secure the exploit or they made the decision that cryptographic calculations can take a hit running on the efficiency cores. Since all of the devices listed have efficiency cores, I'm willing to give it a good chance Apple decided to go that route to completely isolate the cryptographic code. That, or the crypto calculations are so few on these mobile devices that you won't notice a performance difference when or if they're needed. This next story is a little bit of a mixed bag here. Initially, I saw it on 9to5Mac, which they said iFixit praises Apple's diagnostic tool for DIY repairs. But if you look at the actual iFixit article, they say Apple's diagnostic tools stop just shy of being actually useful for repair. So this may have initially sounded like hell's thermostat may have ticked down a couple of degrees, but when you actually read iFixit's article, it's clear they're doing anything but praising Apple. In reality, they're pushing right to repair and want Apple to open up more to allow Apple's tools to be compatible with third-party parts. I've covered this before, but the short version is that the burden is way too high for Apple for this to be practical. Additionally, and this is one thing I never considered before, Apple is, quote, strongly encouraging, end quote, that is, we'll say forcing, people to use Apple authorized service providers ensures that those parts get returned to Apple for proper recycling. Apple has made it a massive ethical principle for their company to recycle everything they possibly can. And they have demoed the technology that they use, and it's been audited, and it is world-leading. Like, it is top-notch, better than anyone else in the world. Other companies have been born out of Apple's efforts to recycle electronics effectively and efficiently. Another part of this is that the reality is that small businesses who aren't Apple authorized service providers, they probably can't afford the cost of recycling microelectronics. There's a lot of mitigations in place to help prevent this practice by small businesses, one of which is ensuring the parts come back to Apple via the official repairs. That is because Apple charges a fee for not returning the defective parts. I haven't seen any good data on what is more common for environmental damage, whether entire electronic devices are being thrown away or repair parts for those devices. I'm curious what iFixit's stance is on this question, since they have a vested interest in right to repair as a parts supplier. Should the end user be charged for recycling parts, or should businesses like Apple and iFixit? Right now, it's a tax burden that, depending on the state and county, might see a tax credit during reporting time to the businesses, but it's not incumbent on the end users. So I don't know how much of an environmental difference this is going to make, and therefore the environmental benefits argument kind of falls flat for me. Last article of the week is that AMD has announced FSR 3.1, showing seriously improved upscaling quality. This is coming from Ars Technica. Now, I'm including this because it may seem like something for us Apple gamers to look forward to. Apple's Metal Effects upscaler is based on AMD's FSR, and since that's open source, it means we may see these improvements over the next year or two. And AMD has only just announced that they're bringing it to Xbox Game Development Kit, so hopefully Apple will be next in line. This is ultimately a short article, but it's worth a read, and it's worth, for nothing else, there's a couple demo images that show the improvement from FSR 2.2 to the new FSR 3.1. So let's all keep an eye on this for the future, and here's hoping the improvements will come for all of our games on Apple's systems. So that's it for news and opinions this week. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and I look forward to seeing you all in the coming week for our next live streams. Take care now. Bye-bye.